I'm Mike Uyek. I love to try new things, and I've had culinary adventures all around the world, as well as right at home. I've had really wonderful food, as well as some really horrible food. I'd like to share some of my adventures with you, and we'll see if I have what it takes to fix whatever goes wrong. This is Recipe Redemption.
Greetings and salutations, Redeemers, and welcome to another episode of Recipe Redemption. Today, I would like to talk about assumptions. You know what happens when you assume, right? So, I'd like to first start off by taking a look at this advertisement. It's an advertisement for a product, and by itself, the product is perfectly fine. However, its application is not. Now, I can't really zoom into the advertisement. The image that I have here is not a very high resolution, so it's a little difficult to read. But basically, what you see before you, the dish that they suggest that you make, is cod fillet with onions, tomato, and bacon. Okay. There's no recipe to this that's included in this advertisement. It's just presented as is. Cod with onions, tomato, and bacon. And that's it. So no recipe. There's no indication of anything other than, and it looks like that's all it is. There's no extra sauce. Doesn't look like there's a sprinkling of any sort of, well, at least of a colorful spice or herb on it whatsoever. No other ingredients are visible. That's it. So, the assumption, I think, one of two things. Either the advertiser thought, this is a perfectly fine dish, eat it just like this. Throw a piece of cod on a bed of onions with a slice of tomato on a slice of bacon, throw it in the oven, I guess. It looks like it's baked. It's not, doesn't have any browning or anything on it, so it looks like it's baked, possibly poached, but I'm going to say baked. And it's enjoyable as is. Or they assume that the consumer who is going to buy the product and presumably thinks this is a perfectly good dish to make has the kitchen skills and the creativity to augment or modify this idea to make it tasty, add something to it, make it their own. You know what happens when you assume. It's a big assumption. Not everyone is universally and equally creative in the kitchen. So I'm going to run in the opposite direction. What if someone said, okay, I'm going to make this exactly as presented, and it says, serve as pictured. If you were able to actually read the text, it's kind of a lower resolution photo, so unfortunately it's difficult to read. But it says to serve as pictured. So what if we serve it as pictured? And that's what I made here. And here's how I made it.
Okay, here we go. Now, it looked like it was on a bed of onions, and it looked like they were onion rings. Just plain onion rings. This one's a little thick, so I'm going to toss it aside. So, I just cut some onion rings. And once again, as a reminder, I'm only making one serving of this, because this looks pretty bland. And it had some tomato, and there wasn't any indication of whether or not the tomato is cooked. I'm going to go ahead and throw it in. And then here's my cod. I got a nice big piece of it, so I'm just going to cut this section of it off and use this for this one serving. One thing you always want to note when you get a piece of cod, or any fish really, is whether or not they left any bones in. Now, these have like cod and salmon. They tend to have what are called pin bones. They aren't ones that come out with the rest of the skeleton when they debone debone the fish when they cut into fillets, so you need to pull those out. So I'm just going to nestle it in the bowl, toss a couple slices of tomatoes in at random. Sure, that looks great. And let's not forget about that random piece of bacon they had draped over the top for no discernible reason. And I'm going to throw this in the oven for about half an hour.
So, we have our baked cod with onion, tomato, and bacon. And a lot of liquid that has been pressed out over time. No salt, no seasonings, no herbs, spices, no sauce, no other ingredients. That's it. Thrown in an oven, baked at 350 degrees. I think it was about 45 minutes. I wanted to make sure that the bacon got, well, it never really got crisp because I didn't want the fish to completely dry out. I think it did anyway, but let's see if I can get a little bit of everything in here. Unfortunately, bacon is, I'm going to have to actually tear it because I didn't actually think to bring a knife with me. And let's get a little bit, or okay, this entire slice of tomato, bacon, fish, onion. I said onion. Okay, here we are. As expected, disappointing. The tomato is actually the most flavorful thing here. If you concentrate, you can taste the cod. It's a fairly mild white fish, so surprise, surprise, not a very strong flavor. Even the onions aren't really all that aggressive in this. So really the tomato and the bacon is what you taste. Which is fine if you like tomato and bacon, but you actually have to eat the onions by themselves to really taste the flavor. They were never caramelized, there's no development of flavor, there's no seasonings to kind of amp up the flavor at all. It's not bad, but if you're serving this to your family, your kids, they might be an open rebellion to this because it's really bland and you kind of have to like fish to begin with. I think basically anything that you can do with this would make it taste better. Well, let's see if we can take those 4 initial ingredients, the cod, the onion, the tomato, and the bacon, rearrange this recipe a little bit, add some things to kind of amp up the flavor, and see what we can come up with. It's got to be better. It's got to be.
Okay, so with the rest of my cod, I'm going to cut these into about inch and a half inch pieces. I'm not going to worry too much about them being uniform, but I'm going to toss them in a bowl with some onion powder, garlic powder, a little bit of Old Bay seasoning. Oh, and a little shuka of cayenne pepper, just so people know who they're messing with. And I'm just going to toss this by hand to combine, try and keep it all in the bowl. And in the meantime, I need to chop up the rest of these onions. I don't want to waste them, even though this is going to be a pain in the butt. And the whole pieces as well. Nice fine dice. And same goes for the tomatoes. Chop those up. Don't have to be really fine, but reasonably small. I'm just going to chuck those onions into some oil in a hot pan and caramelize. Then I'll add the tomatoes, about a cup of water, and here I have about 3/4 of a cup of sugar, about 3/4 of a teaspoon each of onion powder, garlic powder, some ground pepper, and some paprika. stirring to combine all those ingredients, and as it turns out, I decided I needed to add another can of tomatoes. The 3/4 of tomato that I had in there wasn't quite enough. I continue simmering over medium-low heat for, it took me about 45 minutes, till most of the water was cooked out, and it looks something like this. I just take it off the heat and let it cool. So that bacon that you saw earlier, I took and cut them into quarters by cutting them lengthwise and then cutting them crosswise. So I have these thin quarter pieces that I'm wrapping around the cod. Repeat for all the rest, and then throw it under the broiler for about 25-30 minutes. And this is how I plan on serving them, on a bed of steamed asparagus. Just going to arrange 7 or 8 of them on top of the asparagus, like so. You like what I did with the tomatoes and onions earlier? That's my jam, baby! I'm sorry, but it was necessary. So I'm going to put a dollop of my tomato onion jam on top of each of these bacon wrapped pieces of cod. This is sort of like Angels on Horseback, if you've ever heard of that recipe. That's usually shrimp wrapped in bacon, and you top it with barbecue sauce. Not sure what I'll call this creation, but I'm sure I'll think of something clever one day. I'm just going to serve this with a wedge of lemon on the side.
So how'd it turn out? Well, cod is cod. It's a firm, mild flavored whitefish. So it tasted like cod. Bacon is bacon. I didn't cook it to the point where it was actually crisp just yet, but it was firm and chewy, and it held its shape, which is kind of what I was going for. I wanted it to wrap around the cod and actually stay that way. So really, what made the dish was the tomato jam. I did not add as much sugar as most recipes tell you to make a tomato jam. I didn't want it to be, sickly sweet, kind of treacly. That wasn't what I was going for. Just enough to kind of help whatever natural pectins are present in the tomato, and kind of sort of caramelize in a way, not quite reaching caramel stage, but I guess soft ball, so that it sort of helps it to hold together, and it gives it a little bit of a sweetness boost without being overly sweet. And the caramelized onion really gave it that sort of nice umami kick. It's really, really quite good. And even with the reduced sugar in there, that should keep in the fridge for up to 6 months. Not that it's going to last that long, because the stuff is fantastic. Just spread on toast with a little bit of cheese. Yeah, and on your breakfast eggs and sandwiches and all sorts of things. Or just eat it out of the jar with a spoon. I don't judge. So, I think overall it was a pretty successful redemption on this one. What do you think? I invite your comments down below. And if you have any other ideas that you'd like me to try, be sure to comment below as well. And don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button. So, until next time, I'm Mike Uyak, and thanks for watching Recipe Redemption.